take to get a corporate charter? A filing fee and a form. This is why people go to LegalZoom. Hey man, I'll fill it out online, I get my money, and they charge about 3 times the filing fee, and they do nothing else except fill out that form. Is that good enough? I don't know, do you walk outside in your bare underwear? Probably not. You're gonna want pants and a shirt and shoes, maybe even a jacket if it's cold enough, right guys? They give you the bare minimum. That's it, nothing more. They don't tell you what your responsibilities are, they don't tell what your obligations, your liabilities, or how you might make a mistake. They just take your money and fill out that form for you, which a 6th grader could fill out. It's not complicated. It's what do you do with it from there that becomes complicated, okay? So, corporations are creatures of statute. I'm starting at the bottom because LLCs didn't come into existence in the world until about 50 years ago. So we're going to historically go through this with corporations first. You've probably heard the fancy phrases S Corp, C Corp out there bandied around by people, okay? All that is tax filing status. You get the same corporation filed with your state, no matter what state you file it in, but then you need to do a tax election to be taxed as a C Corp or as an S Corp. And if you don't do it timely, they default you into a C Corp. That might not be your best friend. Talk to your tax professional. 99% of all tax professionals I've talked to tell their clients starting small businesses, you want to be an S Corp. Believe me, you want to. And they go, how come? And it's like, that's why you're paying the tax guy. Okay, but I don't make that judgment call. I tell my clients, please talk to your tax professional. Now, it's an election. You can choose A or B. Which one do you want to be? You don't choose, you're a C Corp. You got to choose quickly, okay? The form you fill out with the IRS is a 2553 form. It doesn't take much to fill out. It's not complicated, but you got to know where the form is, how to fill it out, how to send it in, and if you don't do it, you default into a C Corp. What is a mom and pop shop? You might have heard that phrase. You're going to start a donut shop, you and your wife, right? You're good at this. You can make donuts. People love donuts. It makes them happy. It makes you feel good to make people happy. And it keeps the gyms in business. There's a 24-hour fitness near my house. They've been there about 3 years. Winchell's came in and opened up a shop right next door to them. Winchell's is really busy. They're next to the gym. People come out, they're famished. They got to have a donut, right? Undo everything you did, right? A mom and pop shop is nothing more than a small business, okay? Why do we call them mom and pop shops? Because most businesses in America are, okay? They're family. They're mom and pop, and hopefully the kids will join. One of my friends, his last name is Zimpelman. His dad was a concrete guy. He started a business, Zimpelman and Sons, right? He was hoping. He had a son and a daughter. His son didn't want to go into the construction business. His daughter did. He had to change the name of the company. Long and short is, being an S Corp often means you are a mom and pop shop. And it comes into play when you do your notice of issuance of stock and you fill out your forms with the Department of Corporations in the state of California. You can fall under certain exemptions. See, when you sell stock, this is important. If you don't want to go to Club Fed and wear orange pajamas and stainless steel bracelets that cuff behind your back and shackles on your legs, you got to not break securities laws. Why do we have federal securities laws? There was this little thing in the 90s, like California, because we're living in California. Well, there's 2 major exemptions you fall under. It's the mom and pop shop exemption for friends and family. You're all closely related, you know each other, you've been together for years, decades, your whole lives. In other words, I'm not taking advantage of these people because they're innocents. They're part of me. They're my family. They're part of my hood. Then there's the savvy business investor exemption. They got millions of dollars. They know they're gambling. They're going to put a couple $100,000 into your company. They know they could lose it all. Put it on red roulette. 13, spin the wheel. Oops, lost it all. Okay, no big deal. Gambling loss. I can handle it. But you have to fill out special forms for that to prove you're a qualified business investor. The minute you cut over to that exemption, you need a lawyer. You still don't want to risk wearing orange pajamas and stainless steel bracelets and leg irons. You want to make sure you're doing it right. Well, you won't need the same caliber of a lawyer as you need to go to the stock exchange. But you still need to pay some fees, spend some time, put the effort in to make sure you're not breaking the law. Because none of us want to go to jail. Well, we're just trying to make a couple of dollars in our business. Because why do we go into business? We want to make a living, right? My business organizations professor, day one, wrote on the chalkboard, "In quest for profit," and underlined it. This is why we're here. We want to make a dollar, right? So corporations have a lot of history and a lot of fights that have gone to court and gone to the Supreme Court. Case law, binding precedent. So lawyers who research the stuff about corporate law can give you a pretty good understanding of when you're going to be personally liable or not. What it takes to hold you liable, even though you're hiding behind your armor protecting, bullet protecting armor to protect you from your lawsuits holding you personally liable. What does it take to screw up and be personally liable? They know, because the law is pretty clear. About 50 years ago, some countries in Europe thought it'd be a bright idea to take the concept of a partnership, which everybody's used to shaking hands and doing business, and merge it with a corporation where you're not liable. Because nobody wants to be liable when they go into business. Let the business be liable. I don't want to have to pay the bills, right? So they came up with this concept called a limited liability company. All it is a fancy partnership that gets a charter from the state. Cool. And by statute, you're not liable. But what about all these things we know that you could still be liable for? Because all these cases for 400 years that have created a bunch of law in corporations. How much law is there on LLCs? No law. So it's the wild, wild west. You're out there doing this LLC, you think you're not liable, the statute says you're not liable, but by analogy, if you follow corporate law, you still could be. But there's been no case law rulings on that. Well, this went on for 15 or 20 years in Europe before it got to the United States and someone had the bright idea, we need an LLC statute. Now you think some cutting edge state that makes cutting edge law would be the one to come up with that statute first, right guys? California, New York, Illinois, where the big cities are, right? Nope, Wisconsin. The cheese guys. Somebody decided, hey man, we should do what they do in Europe. Okay, so they made their statute. Somebody was the brave new soul to be the first one to do it, and they put it on their tax returns, and the IRS disallowed it. Hey, come on, man. Nope. So they had to fight it back and forth for about 8 or 10 years with all of these different problems with people being disallowed for their entity status for their tax filing before the IRS finally granted a revenue ruling in favor of LLCs being treated as S-corps. It's a pass-through entity, goes on your tax return, just like you're an S-corp or a partnership. Boy, that was lucky. So very rapidly, 8 or 10 other states jumped on the bandwagon because somebody made law and protected their people, right? Guess which state number in order California was, guys?
50.
Nah, not quite that bad. We were in the late 20s, though. We waited till just about everybody else that was anybody was out there, just to make sure things were good. Our cutting-edge legislators waited a long time. So the minute that statute passed, boy, let me tell you, they were teaching classes to lawyers how you could make a bunch of money doing LLCs for people. So I signed up for one of those classes. I paid my money. I went in there. And the guy teaching the class wrote the statute. And he was standing up there going, yeah, you could charge 10 grand. People will pay it, blah, blah, blah. It's the newest thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, why would you charge more to do this entity rather than a corporation when it's the same amount of work for you as a lawyer? And his answer, because people will pay it. Wow, really? I don't think so. I couldn't look in the mirror. I couldn't sleep at night if I was charging my clients more to do option A versus option B. They should have a choice and it shouldn't cost them more. That was my take. So what did I do? I made it the same price. And I brought it way down from what he was talking about. I put it down to the blue collar people, my client base, Ma and Pa Kettle, could afford it. Why? Because I want to help people. Believe it or not, I'm one of those guys. Kind of corny, I know, but that's why I get referrals. because I take care of my people. Okay? So, the LLC statutes are great for general businesses. But the minute lawyers and CPAs and doctors wanted to do it, they were told, oh, time out, time out, time out. You can't do that. Huh? The statute is very narrowly written for just a business, not a professional business. Well, needless to say, all of them lawyers were up in arms. How did we get excluded from the statute? Really? Lawyers write statutes. Legislatures are lawyers. How did we not get in here? That's not fair. Imagine that. They got cut out. So within about a year, they passed an LLP statute, limited liability partnership for professionals. So only doctors and lawyers and CPAs and other people holding a professional license can be an LLP. It's the same thing, just a different label. Same thing. The first thing to learn about LLCs and LLPs, back when the statutes were originally written, is you were a partnership. By definition, that means how many people? 2 or more, right? 2 or more people or entities to create a partnership. Well, what if you just wanted to open your own? Well, it didn't used to work. So they've revised the statute now to allow individual single-member LLCs. Well, wait a minute. Doesn't that kill the whole idea of a partnership and the IRS revenue ruling? And how does that affect liability? Can they still pierce the veil and hold you liable? Will the IRS disallow your entity exemption? Well, the IRS will disallow your exemption. That's already proven. You don't want to be a single member LLC and think the IRS is not going to challenge you. They will, straight up. All 50 states. They've been doing it. So that's a mistake. Do we know if it's going to affect your liability? There's no case law yet. Nobody's gotten screwed bad enough to take it up to the California Supreme Court to find out here, have they? Oops. That makes it kind of dicey as a lawyer to advise people they ought to do an LLC. I go, it's a tax question first. Talk to your tax professional. But second, you got to look at the what ifs on liability. I can't guarantee you that when you think you're protected with an LLC that you really are. We can go by analogy to corporations and how you could be still responsible or not responsible for the business's debts, but we don't know because it's not been tested before. It's like being the first guy to test the bulletproof vest. In the old days, they stood there and they would shoot you in the chest with a musket ball. Are you going to trust that bulletproof vest is going to save your life? I don't think so. Why don't we hang a pig up and put the bulletproof vest on it? A dead pig, preferably. Because if that goes through the bulletproof vest, you're dead, right? We don't know. So LLCs are still kind of dicey on the protection from liability. They say they are, but we don't know from case law whether they really will be in all circumstances. Now, what's the most awesome benefit of an LLC? You don't have to do all that stupid paperwork you do with corporations. If you don't like doing your annual corporate minutes, you don't like having meetings and writing stuff up and wearing all the hats as a shareholder, a director, an officer, and running the company, you just want to go out and do business. It's great for 2 guys with a lawnmower and a weed whacker. Yeah, let's go do business, right? Because they're not paperwork people. It's kind of easy, right? Just have your little agreement, like a partnership agreement. It's called an operating agreement for your LLC. Have your little charter from the state. Go shake hands and go do business, right? But the question is, how does it affect you? Now, the big tax bugaboo with LLCs has to do with your annual franchise tax, what you pay to the state. With corporations, there's a flat fee, and if you go over too much, it's based on your net profit, right? With LLCs, it's based on your gross sales. So, let's say you were buying and selling cars, and you got a car dealership. You got a lot of costs, maybe not so much profit. If you're a architect and you were performing architectural services, you got most of that in your time, very little cost. Probably not bad, right? LLCs today are used more commonly by lawyers for clients with CPA advice for what used to be used for a REIT, a real estate investment trust. It's where people are buying into land, sitting on it in speculation, hoping it's going to be worth something, and then selling it at the end. They got no income. It's just, sell it at the end and close it, right? They're not dealing with gross sales, net sales. There's no sales. They're sitting on dirt, right? You buy 40 acres outside of Needles, and you hope that they keep growing, you can sell it. People did that outside of Palm Springs. They made a lot of money. Palm Springs grew. Needles, not so much. Okay, other business entities. A business trust. We talked about a REIT, right? Real estate investment trust. Great way to hold land in the old days, right? You got a trustee who's personally liable. You get the beneficiaries who ain't liable for nothing, right? That sounds kind of like a limited partnership, right? Why would you do it with a trust instead of a limited partnership? Let's see, 260 years ago, when King George wasn't giving out charters, you could write a trust and create a liability protection, because you're smart lawyers, for your friends and family. Make them beneficiaries. And then one of you gets to be the lucky guy standing in the target and be the general partner, be the trustee, be liable, right? Everybody else is a beneficiary, no liability, and a trust is just a contract. It's an agreement. You can do anything you want by agreement, right, guys? As long as it ain't illegal or immoral. And immoral, it's questionable sometimes. You can still do that. As long as it's not going to put you in orange pajamas and stainless steel handcuffs and leg irons, you can do it by contract. So real estate investment trusts were born of necessity to try to protect your assets when you couldn't get a corporate charter back in the day. And they've continued on for 260 years because the ultra rich know about it. Their lawyers know about it. A little known version of that is called the Massachusetts Business Trust. This was, again, back when Massachusetts was a British colony, and they couldn't get charters because they pissed off King George. Oops, no one's giving it away. How are we going to do it? Smart lawyers came up with, hey, let's do a trust. It's a way to start your business, a way to not be liable. That's why they invented those things. Now, blended entities. We sort of alluded to this with the limited partnership. Who's going to be the general partner? Somebody who can't get shot. Make it a corporation, right, guys? That's a blended entity. You can mix and match your entities however which way you want. I had two clients who didn't want anyone to know who they were. They didn't want any government people having their nose in their names. Why? One had a conviction for federal crimes for drug running from the 1960s when he got caught with a plane full of hashish. Another guy just got busted for healthcare fraud. They're both federal felons. They didn't want their names all over it, right? So they formed single-member LLCs in Delaware. Why? Because Delaware has a cute little rule. If you don't tell them who you are, they just fine you 15 bucks. Pay the fine. Never fill out the form saying who owns it, right? It's the cost of doing business. $15 well spent for anonymity. They took those two out-of-state LLCs to California, and they formed a general partnership. Boom! Now the general partnership's owned by two companies that have nobody you can see behind them. So they were able to run a business and not have anybody in the government know who they are. Except the IRS, right? Oops, there's always that wrinkle, right? They tried. They came to me after they performed this genius task and said, hey, we need to get a contractor's license. I go, oh, that's great. Contractor's License Board does not recognize LLCs. Really? Yeah. Had to find another way. Okay, so what about this? It's more than just paperwork. Why? Because there's lots of ways to screw up, right? We just talked about the simple one-page charter. You pay your little fee, you fill out your one page, it's a piece of cake, right? Except with corporations, there's 3 levels. 3 is a magic number in mythology and in the Bible and a lot of other places. The shareholders are like beneficiaries of a trust. They just own the stock. Shareholders get to vote their stock to do one thing: elect directors. That's it. Or close the company and go bankrupt. But other than that, they get no ability to run the company. Sort of like limited partners. They got no say. The directors are like the marioneteers. They pull the strings on the puppets. Make them sing and dance and walk and talk. The directors set policy and direction for the corporation, but they don't run the day-to-day affairs. They elect the officers. The officers run the company and the day-to-day affairs. President, secretary, treasurer, and you can have a vice president or multiple vice presidents if you want. Why all these fictions? Because a corporation is a creature of statute and it is a legal fiction. And all these parts, 3 different hats you wear, are part of what it takes to be a corporation. And it's a little frustrating, which is why people go, I'll just be a partnership or an LLC, it's easier. But if you got a lawyer who does that stuff for you and calendars it out and says, time for your annual meeting, you had it, right? Mm-hmm. You guys went to Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
Business expense, right? Going to Maui?
Yeah.
You had your meeting there in Hawaii? Okay, all those are tax deductions because you just decided to have your corporate meeting in Hawaii. Booyah, right? Mom and pop are enjoying the sand. There's legitimate things you can write off with a corporation that you can't get away with a sole proprietorship or a partnership. Talk to your tax guy. They can help you. Now, all that fiction helps you, but then you got to do the paperwork. Oh my God, paperwork, really? Again, if you got a lawyer, you're not doing the paperwork. You're saying, hey, do the paperwork. Where do I sign? That's all you need to know. Where do I sign, right? You should get the advice to choose the entity that works best for you, for your legal protection and for your tax benefits, okay? And thinking about the future and how you plan on getting out of it, all right? Now, the 3 types of hats we talked about, right? Shareholder, director, officer. The 3 types of paperwork are your articles, which is your corporate charter, your bylaws, which is like the Constitution, right? And your minutes, which is like the congressional record. What did you do this year, next year, the year after that? All these years of minutes talk about what you did. And you can have motions and resolutions and all that stuff. So, that paperwork's kind of important. Why do I have to do this? If the corporation's going to be worth a darn, you got to use it like a corporation. Buying bulletproof vest and buying armor doesn't do you any good if it's in the back of your car. You got to wear it, you got to use it. So, how do you do that? Anytime you do something as a corporation, if it's not something that you have express authority as an officer under your bylaws to do, you need a resolution from the board of directors saying you have the authority to do that. You go sign a $5 million licensing contract and you didn't have prior authorization from the board, you might be personally liable if that goes sideways. Oops. I thought I wasn't going to be liable. Well, you didn't ask the right questions. How do I not be personally liable? You act as a corporation. You don't act on your own. Now, if you made the mistake of signing that $5 million contract and didn't have prior board authorization, can you fix it? If the question gets asked before you have a problem, the answer is sure. Go to your lawyer, go, oops, I just did this. Now what do? Have a board of directors meeting, discuss the issue, have them vote on it, you abstain, the other directors can vote to ratify your conduct and say, thumbs up, we like this contract, we approve it. You have retroactive authorization to sign that contract. Whew. So much for that $5 million liability you might have had, because now it's a benefit to not just the corporation, but to you, because you've now given up the liability that you have for having signed that contract, that you could be sued for if it goes sideways. So why we have to do this is to cover our backsides. We don't want to be personally liable. This is why we use entities in the first place, right? To avoid personal liability. Another super important thing to do is not spend money out of the corporation for personal expenses. That sounds pretty obvious, but people do it all the time. Oh, just pay my utilities out of the company. Oh, I went to Nordstrom's and bought that really cute dress and purse. Let's put it on the corporate Amex. It's a corporate expense. We're going to a corporate function. No, it doesn't work. 2 or 3 of those, and some smart attorney is going to hold you personally liable and pierce the corporate veil. That's a fancy legal term for, oops, what corporation? Okay? Other things to know about paperwork and business entities. Shareholders agreements. What's that? You and your 5 best friends who started that corporation, maybe you had an agreement, a side deal, to always be This one's the treasurer. This one's the vice president of construction. This one is the executive vice president. I'm the president. Well, if that's your deal, you better put it in black and white or it's not going to happen, right? A shareholders agreement is merely an agreement to always elect yourselves as directors and officers in the following manner and how you plan on running the company. It can also help bypass the need to have annual corporate minutes. Because if you've already agreed this is the way it's always going to be, you don't need to do that every year because it's always going to be that way. So that can help streamline the necessity to having annual meeting minutes, which is such a pain in the butt for most people, and most entrepreneurs don't want to do it. Honestly, it takes about 20 minutes of your lawyer's time to do it every year. It's kind of worth the toll, and it's a legitimate business expense. But if you want to do a shareholders agreement, you could spend 20 or 30 attorney hours negotiating and going back and forth and signing a contract that does the same thing as having your annual minutes. Buy-sell agreements. Two people who would otherwise be partners are now in a corporation. They each own half the stock. But if you want out, I don't want to have you sell to anybody on the street. I want first right of refusal to buy you out. If you die, I don't want your spouse to be owning the stock and voting it. I want to be able to buy you out. Make sense? You want to maintain control? You want to maintain the leadership? You have a buy-sell agreement. How do you fund that if somebody dies?
Insurance.
Life insurance. Everybody buys life insurance for something. And the premiums on that life insurance that are being paid can be paid by the corporation as a legitimate business expense because it's for a buy-sell agreement for the business. Really a nice thing to know, right? Licensing agreements. We talked a little bit about this before I got up. You want to license your product, your invention, your intellectual property, go ahead, but you need to have a contract. You need to think this through. You need to write it out. You need to protect yourself. Governmental registrations. There's all kinds of forms and paperwork that can get filled out. We don't have time to go into it all here. But suffice it to say there's minimally 3 different things that need to go in for an LLC or a corporation to the state. You fail to do one of those, they pop your charter. Oops. And one of those is an annual thing. Statement of officers and directors. It's a $25 fee. You can do it online, on the website, put it on your Visa card. Piece of cake. But you got to know how to do it. You got to get your first one filed. And then you get sales and use taxes. A lot of people think, oh, well, whatever. Let's say you've got a nonprofit. We remember this one, right? Oh, we don't pay taxes. We're a nonprofit. You selling something? Yeah. There's something called sales tax.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. You still got to pay sales tax. Oops. There's all of these places where the government sticks its hand into your pocket. It wouldn't hurt to know about it before you make a mistake, because you don't want to be, again, on the chopping block. Okay, financing your business. Now we've got this business started, we need money to operate it, right? Well, there's 2 ways to finance your business in the broad sense. Debt versus equity. Equity is money you put in to capitalize it when you start it. Okay? You're buying in for your shares, or you're buying in for your partnership share in an LLC or a partnership, right? Someone's putting money in to get the thing off the ground. If you put in $1,000 to get it off the ground, that'll pay the legal fees for part of it. If you and all 5 of your friends do it, you might be able to pay the lawyer and the CPA, and then what? Open a bank account with $100? Oops, now what, right? How are you going to run the business? How are you going to rent space to run your business? How are you going to buy product? How are you going to manufacture something? How are you going to market it? You got no capital. Well, you either need to put more money in as equity, or you need to go into debt. Well, debt affects your credit score and your ability to borrow. So there's different kinds of debt. There's private loans, mom and pop, your friends, your cousins, your neighbors, some rich guy down the street. Be careful about that rich guy down the street, because he's not friends or family. He might come after you for fraud someday. Oops. That's scary. Bank loans. Think Chase Bank wants to loan your brand new company with no credit history $5 million? I don't think so. Not without personal guarantees. And that's the whole point of being a corporation or an LLC, is not to sign that personal guarantee, right? But I didn't want to put my house on the line. I didn't want to put my retirement savings on the line. What's a debenture? Have anybody heard that fancy legal phrase thrown around? All that is a fancy promissory note that's kind of like stock. It's kind of a converted type thing. But giving away debentures is subject to the same securities laws regulations that the SEC has. And you have to have wealthy investors fill out forms and prove that they're gambling and they know it and they could lose it all. Or you're at risk for club fed. Not fun. And, oh, by the way, all those four on top there affect your ability to borrow money and your credit because you're in debt. You don't have any equity, you're in debt. We talked about the sale of stock and some of the things to be afraid of, making sure you fill out the forms, making sure you comply with securities laws or have an exemption. The UCC filings, what's that? So you want to borrow $500,000. They'll lend you $500,000, but they're going to want a UCC1 filing on any equipment or products that you make with that money, and they're going to register that with the state so the whole world knows they've got a $500,000 lien on your stuff. Well, heck, that's debt, right? Yes, it is. And it's recorded debt, so they all know you owe money. Tax issues. Well, are there tax issues on how you receive money and stuff? You bet there are. Especially when you don't pay it back. Capital gains. When you spend $5,000 to buy your stock and then you sell your company on your exit clause for $2.5 million because you cashed out after 3 years and you made a bunch of money, you're going to pay a capital gains tax based on what did you pay for your stock versus what did you sell it for. That's a tax issue and you need to pay attention to that. Can you change that? Absolutely. By capitalizing your company more by buying more stock instead of loaning your company money and paying yourself back on a loan. So you go, how do you do that? Well, when you incorporate and you decide, I want 20 million shares, are you going to sell all 20 million shares to yourself and your 5 friends day one? Or are you going to sell 2 million shares and keep a bunch in reserve in case you need to put more capital in tomorrow? Or 3 years from now, or 10 years from now. Of course you're going to keep stock in reserve so you can sell more and capitalize your company more, right? That's a way to change your capital gains, is putting more capital in, so when you do sell it, you have less of a gain. It's a tax game, whether you want to put it in as equity or you want to put it in as a loan. Talk to your tax professional. If you have a loan, you need to pay back that loan with regular recurring payments. It needs to be on a written promissory note, approved by your board of directors, and it has to have at least a reasonable rate of return interest. If you're not charging the corporation interest, the IRS can disallow that note. Another tax problem in the making. Okay, shield and sword. Why do we have LLCs and corporations? Because we want to avoid personal liability. So are you going to be personally liable for your business debts? That's a big unknown. Hopefully, if you do it right, if you get legal advice and you follow it, a corporation or an LLC will protect you from personal liability. The first thing to know about being personally liable is don't sign personal guarantees. You just undid all the good work you did talking to that lawyer. Why would you sign a personal guarantee when you went out of your way to not be personally liable? I can think of 2 reasons. One, the big bank won't loan you any money without a personal guarantee, and you need their money, and you have no other way to get it. Or 2, the landlord of the place you want to rent space from won't sign a lease without a personal guarantee. Fine. When you sign those loans or those leases, do it with full knowledge that's the first creditor you're going to pay. Because if you don't, they're coming after you. That's the last guy you're going to stiff. Everybody else can get not paid. You're paying that creditor first. Why? You don't want to be personally liable. Just common sense, right? But you got to think about it. You can't just go along and just do things. You got to think about it as you go. All right? How to legally take money out of your business. Well, if you loan the company money, you're paying yourself back on that loan plus interest. That interest is income to you, but it's a way to legally pull money out of the business. Another way is you buy property and you lease it to your corporation. Corporation has to pay you rent to use that property. Turns out this last tax year, that was a good way to take money out of your business. You get a tax return with a refund instead of owing the government money. You take it home as a paycheck? Oh, you're going to owe a lot of money to the government. You take it home as rent? You didn't. Who would have known? Folks in Congress knew. President knew. Why did they do that? Because that's what they were doing. You want to find ways to figure out how to pay less taxes? Talk to your CPA and look at what your congressional representatives are doing. They're going to make sure they pay less tax than the rest of us, right? So do what they do, okay? You can take it out by paychecks. You can take it out by interest. You can take it out by rent. You can take it out by dividends. Now, what is a dividend? You've heard of big companies like Disney, right? They sell stock, you buy stock, you're hoping to make money. Most of the old retired people make their living off of the dividends on their stocks. Social Security barely touches their day-to-day needs, okay? So they're buying stock based on its ability to pay a good dividend. A dividend is a percentage of the profits. So say your company is a New York Stock Exchange company and it made $100 million in profit. The board of directors votes to declare a $20 million dividend, put the other $80 million and recapitalize it back into the company for growth. Okay? That $20 million gets divided out by the number of shares, and everybody gets a little piece of that pie. And that goes out to them as a check, and then they get a 1099. Because it's income, and they got to pay tax on it. That's just another way to pull money out of your company. If you're a little company instead of a New York Stock Exchange company, you can still take dividends. But you're the board of directors, you and your friends, and you decide how much you're going to take home. But it goes based on who owns what in shares. So you can do stock bonuses as dividends. You can do performance bonuses for employees and officers. You can take salary. There's lots of ways to legally pull money out. Don't be paying your Amex bill for your vacation to Hawaii. That was not a corporate one. You took your family and you went surfing and you went on one of those little submersibles and put that all in the business. Please don't. That puts you into trouble, and piercing the corporate veil can really happen. That little thing down there at the bottom, piercing the corporate veil, that's just them running you through with a sword and saying your armor's not good enough. I got you. There's lots of ways to avoid them piercing the veil. The first is follow the corporate formalities. Act like a corporation. Only pay corporate bills with a corporate account, not personal bills. You do all those things, you're good as gold. That's what all the case law tells us for corporations. LLCs, we think so. Follow the same rules the corporations do and you should be good, right? But we're not sure yet. The analogy is there. It's an entity the same, but it's a different entity. It's like having steak versus ham. They're both good, they're both meals. Okay, intellectual property. Trade names, common law intellectual property, trade secrets, trademarks, copyrights, patents. The last three are creatures of statute, okay? Copyright is from one part of the government, trademarks and patents are from another. USPTO handles patents and trademarks. The first three, most people aren't terribly aware of. A trade name is just the name you've been doing business under. And you've been using it for so long, everybody knows that's you. You haven't applied for professional protection with a trademark. It's just like, I've been using this for 30 years. I don't have a trademark, but I've been using it. Everybody knows me by this. You have common law, which is state statutory protection, because we recognize the English common law by statute. And under the common law, if you used it long enough, you've got rights to it. And somebody infringes on it, you should be able to stop them. But if they go and apply for a trademark nationwide, and they get it from the USPTO, and you've been using it over there in Sacramento for the last 40 years, they probably can't shut you down because you've got priority, right? But you can shut anybody else down, except for the guy with that trademark. Why does that matter? Just like the DBA we talked about. You're only in one county. What if you want to expand? That name's not going to do you much good unless you get a bigger footprint, right? One way to protect that trade name from your little mom and pop shop that's just a partnership with mom and pop is to incorporate or form an LLC, because then you get statewide protection for that name. You want nationwide? Get the trademark. What's a trade secret? It'd be something like a patent, except you're not going to tell anybody. You're going to keep it under the lowdown. You and your staff know about it. You make them sign contracts not to disclose it, or you'll sue them. You've got a special process by which you do something that nobody else can do, and it's really cool. You could take that same process and apply for a patent, or you could keep it secret. Why would you keep it secret instead of get a patent? That's an important IP question for your IP professional. One reason might be that at the end of a patent, it's donated to the world. Trade secret, if you keep it secret forever, you can keep it forever. But can someone reverse engineer it? Can they figure it out? Answer, probably, right? To prove someone violated your trade secret's a lot harder than to prove they violated your patent. Quick story, I ended up accidentally in the newspaper. I try to avoid the news. I wrote a lawsuit for a client who bought a company after researching it and spending time with it and thought it was worthwhile, where they had trade secrets. Their trade secrets are super important to making that product and to being able to sell it and make money. And all the employees signed these non-compete clauses and secret clauses about the trade secrets, right? The guy sold the company to my client. Very next week, the guy's aunt quit because she worked there. She'd signed all those agreements. She went down the street, opened up her own business, and did the same dang thing. So we sued her for violation of the trade secrets, breach of contract, and all the rest of this. Well, what was the company? They made cookies. That's right, really cool cookies, where they had a special dough recipe where they could drill a hole with a drill press, insert a stick with frosting, and decorate them and make little cookie bouquets. It was really cool, but hey man, you're stealing my cool business that I just paid good money for because you work there? You signed an agreement not to do this. These are our trade secrets. It took years for these people to develop this recipe, and I just paid a couple $100,000 for it, and you're stealing it. Well, needless to say, the newspaper thought it was funny. Computer chips versus cookie chips. Trade secret law. It was funny. My client was most amused when she saw it in the newspaper the next morning.
What happened? What was the end result?
Oh, we shut her down.
Okay.
Took all her profits away, shut her company down, the whole works. Got an injunction. But you still have to sue. The minute you got to hire a lawyer and go after somebody, where's all your profit going? And again, remember the three costs of litigation? The money, the time out of your life, and the emotional energy. Oh, this lady was livid. You can imagine you spent $250,000 to buy this thing, and the very next couple of weeks, the guy's aunt goes and opens a competing business. It's like, really? I don't think so.
How long did it take to shut her down? What was the...
About 3 months. You still got to get to court. I mean, you got to file it. You got to file a motion. It was just a real royal pain. And of course, the newspaper was hilarious. Okay, ownership, transference, and inheritance. How do you own your intellectual property? If you hold it in your own name, and you have a stroke or a heart attack or get hit by a bus, and all your friends and family put money into the company, and the IP's in your name, what's the company own? Nothing? Oops. You need to transfer that to your company. That's why you formed a company, so it has it, so it can license it. If the IP's in your name and the company signs a license agreement for $5 million with a big company, what's the company got to license out? Nothing. They just breached the contract by very nature of you can't comply with the contract because you don't own it to license it. You need to think these things through before you sign license agreements. Please talk to your IP professional and your lawyer and do it right. Don't get yourself caught in this mistake. It's real easy to screw up. How to hold ownership of your business? Well, again, it depends on the kind of entity, whether it's a corporation or an LLC or a limited partnership or whatever it is. But if it's, again, in your name and you die, you're holding it, now you're not. How are we going to get it off the floor? Dead people don't sign deeds or pink slips or stock certificates, do they? Now what's your family going to do? How are they going to run the company? Who's going to inherit it? How's it going to go? You need a plan, right? Just like getting into business, you need a plan for getting out of business. One of those plans is called an estate plan. What is an estate? An estate is the things owned by a dead person. Okay, one of the ways to have an estate plan is to not have any things when you die. Give it all away while you're alive to other people or to entities, or hold it in a different title, such as bifurcating title to legal and equitable, which is called a trust. So when you're holding the legal title as trustee and you die, there's a successor trustee who's now in charge. That successor trustee follows the terms of the trust and divides it among the beneficiaries, and you just avoided going to court for probate. You avoided a lot of legal hassles, and your chosen beneficiaries have inherited it without having to spend time and money and grief and pay lawyers and possibly risk getting into fights with each other, because they just accept what they're being given or have a good time and fight it out. If you fight it out, you might get nothing, because if the trust is written right, there might be a don't fight clause. How many people don't want their kids fighting over their stuff when they're dead? All of us. Every trust I've ever written, and I've done thousands of them, please don't fight. If you do, you're dead to me. You ain't getting nothing. I want you to be nice to your siblings. So this is why it matters. We care about our family, we care about our business. Some of us, our business is our baby more than our kids. As long as you know what someone's bottom line is, what their Waterloo is, what their baby is, you can help plan for what they want to do. But you need to know what's important to them. So a will, a trust, and intestacy. A will is just a document that does nothing. It says to the judge, hey, this is what I want to do. But it doesn't do anything by itself. It only works if it's admitted to probate and goes through a full probate court trial process. Yuck. A trust is a manner of holding title to avoid probate. If you do it right, you maybe need an hour of an attorney's time for advice, a CPA, and you can wind it down on your own in a couple of days or weeks. Years if it's more complicated, but it's all how much assets and how complicated is the person's net assets. Okay? Intestacy. That's a fancy legal word for you died without a will or a trust. You didn't have a plan. You have no plan in writing. It's all in your head. You didn't put it in black and white. Nobody knows what you meant. You didn't spell it out. So the law is going to tell you how it goes based on what the government thinks you want to do with your stuff. When was the last time any of us trusted the government to make decisions for us? I don't think so. Please do not die intestate. I'm handling 2 probates of dead people's things intestate because they didn't think to do a will or a trust. And it's ugly. No, I'm sorry, 3 of them right now. And I've been doing this almost 30 years. I've never had 3 at once. In fact, I can't say that I've had 2 at once. It's just not smart to die without a plan. So, your exit strategy and succession. Buy-sell agreements we talked about. It's a great way to work it out with your partners, your business associates in advance. If you want to get out, here's how we're going to do it, right? Key man life insurance. Hey, that buy-sell can be handled with that. Or your inventor dies on you while you're in the middle of this. You got to hire people to be able to replace them in your company. Be a good thing for the company to have money to do that. The company now has no money and no inventor. Oops, we got a problem. Someday you might want to sell that business. Do you have a plan? Have you figured out how? Have you thought about capital gains? Those are all important things to think through. Sale of your intellectual property. Besides licensing, you could sell. Maybe you can't get someone to sign a license agreement. They don't want to pay that, but they'll buy it from you. Well, how much will they pay for it? It might be worth selling that IP, right? Inheritance issues we discussed briefly. Capital gains and tax issues we discussed briefly. These are all things to think through. Okay, I think I'm done. We've got some of the basic layouts here, and I'm going to hand it back over.
Thanks, David. So what we have here is just kind of a little bit of a recap of some of the things that he talked about in terms of entity formations. This information will be on all of this information will be posted, of course, but this is kind of a brief snapshot of one particular aspect of it, which is, the ownership requirements of the various corporation types. And then this is speaking solely to the types of documents that need to be used to govern your business, and some of the other liability considerations, all of which he spoke about in his presentation. But it's just kind of a summary, kind of comparing them all side by side. Does anyone have any particular brief questions for him at this particular time? We'll start over here.
I have a couple, so I don't know, should I shoot them all out, or can we come back?
Hit one and let somebody else speak, and then we're going to do brainstorming, and we may have time to hit the rest.
And you can always speak with me afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh, let me pick the best one.
Can we come back to you?
Well,
I don't want to rush
first
you.
one I had. Just, so in the beginning you mentioned something about like LegalZoom and like those simple things and
Yeah.
about incorporating in Nevada.
There are pros and cons to everything.
If you do that, if you start an LLC and then I'm here tonight and I go, oops, I should have incorporated.
Yeah.
How complicated is it to change your?
They can be converted. It's a form and a fee.
Yeah.
But again, at that point, your best is consult both a legal professional and a tax professional, because there are tax consequences for conversions. You need to think about these things. And all the paperwork that you failed to fill out can always be done unless you're in a lawsuit. The minute you're in a lawsuit and you start creating the past on paper, you're technically committing a crime. Because now you're trying to hide from creditors and avoid liability.
Did you say that the DBA is county specific?
Correct.
So what if you're on the internet? And how does that affect doing a DBA if you're
Yeah, you
doing
can
business
only
on the internet?
you can only file a lawsuit in small claims or superior court in the county you have your DBA. So if somebody that you did business with is in Duluth, Minnesota, you can't file a lawsuit against them in Duluth, Minnesota, or any place other than the county that you filed your DBA in.
And do they also have to sue you in?
They can sue you wherever they want to.
So you have to go wherever.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem. So if you're doing internet business, you got to make sure you have a contract that contains a choice of law and a venue clause. The choice of law says California law applies, and any litigation involving this contract or arising out of this contract needs to be filed in San Diego County, California.
Okay.
Because then you've put it in contract and they've agreed to it, so guess where the lawsuit's going to have to be? In your backyard.
Right.
With your lawyer in your backyard, and you don't have to go stay in a hotel and fly out there to deal with it.
I only know one state that allow these three particular issues I want to look at. One is anonymous or anonymity. Second one is one person LLC, and third is disallowance of charging orders. So they disallow charging orders to the acting company.
The charging orders, for those of you who don't understand, is if there's a liability against the entity, being able to charge back to the shareholder or the limited liability company member. And those charging orders can in fact happen in most states. Very few states do not allow a charging order, okay? With respect to anonymity, I know Delaware allows for anonymity, at least it did. And they really don't, but they just fine you a small amount if you don't do it. Most states will take away your franchise. You'll lose your charter if you're trying to remain anonymous, okay? And what was your third one?
Disallowance of charging orders.
We talked about that
single
first.
Single
person
LLC.
Many states will allow you to do it, California included, but the IRS disallows it, so it doesn't do you any good. The IRS is the United States tax agency. They will disallow that entity status.
But being allowed single person LLC, you don't have to go through all those hoop jumping,
It's less hoop jumping than you think. It really isn't that complicated. Your second member could be your spouse. It could be one of your kids. It could be a trust that is for the benefit of your kids when you die. And you're the trustee of the trust. So there's two members now. You individually and the trust. I mean, there's lots of ways around that.
There's also different percentages you can.
Exactly. I've got a friend in Florida. He and his wife both wanted to form LLCs to do consulting. Well, each one put the other one down as 1% on their LLCs because she's not going to be part of his, he's not going to be part of hers. But to make it past the IRS stink test, they each have 1% of the other person's LLC.
Did you have another question, Tom?
I do, yes. What's the difference between the LLCs amongst the different states? What makes one state LLC better than another state's?
Okay, that's a great question because it affects where you set up your LLC or your corporation. Okay? Every state has their own statute for a corporation. Every state has their own statute for an LLC. Most of those are pretty much paralleling each other. There are some tweaks and differences, okay? Where it really matters is income tax. You live in California, it doesn't matter if you're company is in Nevada or South Dakota or Alaska or Delaware. They're going to go, you live here, and two things are going to happen. You have an office here, you're doing business here, you now need to take your foreign entity and register with the Secretary of State here and pay a registration fee, which by the way is 50% higher than if you started it here to begin with, and do all the same paperwork here. Now you're doing it in 2 states. And any income you make has to be paid on your tax return here. So it does you no good to go to Texas or Nevada where they have no personal income tax unless you live there more than 50% of the time. That's the problem. And this is where people get into so much trouble using all of these online or cheap products and services, is they think they're being smart because there's no state income tax. They think they're being smart because the paperwork's easier, and they create more paperwork and more tax problems for themselves, thinking they can do that. God help them if they file tax returns without considering the implications of the personal tax liability here. Because now you got a problem with tax fraud. That's why it's a brilliant idea, because most people don't think about that. They just form it in another state because they think it's going to be all these wonderful things because of what they were told.
One more question, Alex?
That's my question exactly. Where can we go to find all the paperwork we filed? Like I started back in 06, and I want to know all the history that...
Everything you filed with the government, right?
Yeah.
There's this wonderful website, California Secretary of State. You go to the business portal, you look up your entity, and it'll show you all the stuff filed. And some of those things are even PDFs, and you can pull them up, print them, save them, whatever you want. By the way, it's also a great way to find out about your enemies, not just you. You can look up anybody you want, find out about their company, who's in charge. Everything they've done on paper with the Secretary of State's office is fully available now. It used to be you needed to write a letter, pay a fee, and wait 6 or 8 weeks, and maybe they'd send it to you on time. Now it's click of your fingers on the internet. It's amazing. The Secretary of State, you can get that stuff. Department of Corporations is not online. You got to go through the writing a letter process and paying a fee. But all of that stuff is public records. It belongs to the government, which means the public can get it. So everything you put in those filings, you better make sure is accurate. You better make sure it does what you want it to do and doesn't give away too much that you don't want to give away. Because all of that will come back and bite you in the backside if you do it wrong.
Here's the link to that website. I'll go into a little bit more detail on some of this other stuff here in just when we come back from the brainstorm break. So thank you, David.
Thank
He's going to
you.
stick around to be available to ask some more questions later.
One-on-one.
But so you received an entity worksheet. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it during the presentation or beforehand. So we're running a little behind on time, but I want to give you guys about 10 minutes to look over this, review it. You can talk to your seatmate. If you don't have the information to fill it out, that's fine. These forms and the others from prior sessions are basically intended to be guides and worksheets for you to hang on to. So as you progress through, maybe you don't have all the information to fill out these particular worksheets at the particular time, you have them so you can do it later. But if you want to take about 5 or 10 minutes, talk with your seatmate, fill it out, and then we will resume. Do you have a question, Michelle?
I'd like about 2 minutes just to give a little bit of update.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, with regard to the Inventors' Rights Resolution, we've now visited 5 of the congressional offices in Southern California. I had an appointment at Juan Vargas' office today. Have an appointment on Thursday, May 23rd at Susan Davis' office. If anybody lives in her district, and you're an inventor, I'd sure like you to accompany. It really makes a difference when we have an inventor go with us to these appointments. Fortunately, I've been able to have an inventor go with me to at least one or more inventors to go with me to all the other offices. So, and I have other requests in. So please let me know if you would be available to go on that date. Thank you.
When is the date for Susan Davis?
It's Thursday, May 23rd at 10:30 in the morning.
What district is she?
She is mainly central San Diego.
So take about 5-10 minutes to work on the worksheet, brainstorm, and then we're going to come back and do some other things. As soon as we get back.
Quite a while ago. Oh, did?
Overtime too much? Yeah, I lost it. No, I told him.
Martha Stewart when she said the prison. It wasn't the securities violation. It was lying to the FBI. She could have told him, I ain't talking to you. Shut up, go away, leave me alone, talk to my lawyer. Instead, she opened her mouth and said false statements. That's what she did. They didn't bust her security. It was about security. Yeah, they were interrogating her, and she just felt the need to lie instead of saying, no, I ain't talking to you. Talk to my lawyer. Same thing we tell all the criminal clients. Keep your mouth shut. Please do it. I'm not going to talk to you without a warrant.
That's actually a really good segue to my last question. The issue, like, okay, if you work at, I would be right? You'll be like, as a
I've been trying to find another outlet for my articles.
just have a few more things to cover. Did anyone have any questions about the handout that they wanted to ask or raise? If not, we're going to move on from the handout and from the entity formation portion. Okay, so a couple of things before we move to the next couple of slides. I think the new person left. So is there for the Who Needs Who session? Missing something, need something, want something? Yes.
Yeah. Talking a lot.
You're getting your money's worth tonight.
I posed a question in the Facebook group, so I'm just going to read it and kind of just give it some context. Basically, the idea is is there sort of a concept for essentially, like, so last month, right, we learned about some of the expenses associated with intellectual property and filing patents and things. So really, I'm trying to say, like, can you go to like venture capitalists or angel investors and say, look, you know, I have this idea that look at the marketplace, there's nothing like it, you know, anecdotally, you know, say for example, the automobile industry, like this is a, you know, like I personally have an idea for like a safety thing, right? Like Volvo might jump on it and say, this is like a $100 million thing, like for their interest, would make me some money in licensing. Can you use that? Can you, I guess, get somebody to give you money to pay the intellectual property, you know, the patent filing fees and all that, but then in exchange they get equity, you know, they share the profits with you. Is that a thing?
So you can structure a license agreement any number of ways.
But
There's
even before it.
well, so
I'm sorry, just go ahead.
yeah, so if you're talking about a licensing deal, a licensing deal can be structured any number of ways and include things in there such as who's going to pay for what other extraneous expenses, not explicitly related to the product as it gets to market. So those types of things can be in there. You could also take it as part of an advance on a future royalty to pay those things yourself up front. So it really depends on what your strategy is and how that gets structured out. Not sure if that explicitly answers your question. If you're talking about raising some sort of funds in advance of or prior to.
Yeah. So right now, like I, you know, like many people here, like I have an idea, I'm kind of working on it, but I don't have the, I don't know, $70,000 to kind of do it, huh?
Read Stephen Key's books. Join his club.
Well, that's different. That's not necessarily what he's talking about. I think
I can have an idea for a company, right, and go to Coast Angels and get $1 million and go make my company. Is there a mechanism like that to say, I have an idea for intellectual property, can I have some funding to go ahead and get it done, and then we'll, you know, make money on the licensing of that after?
well,
I'd like to try to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself at risk trying to raise money from somebody up front without having both an entity to do it with and some legal protection that you're not going to get sued for fraud. And those, quote, angel investors, end quote, sometimes are sharks taking advantage of you, and sometimes you're taking advantage of some little old lady. You got to be careful. It can put you at risk of criminal liability or civil liability. You got to be really careful.
yeah, because keep in mind, there's no guarantee that your patent is going to be issued. So if you're saying, I need to raise funds to pursue patent prosecution on my idea, and once I get my patent, I'm going to be able to license it and make, you know, $1 bazillion and we'll all be rich. That path may never come to fruition. So as he was indicating, whatever your agreement is and whoever that is with, you need to have all the proper protections in place and all of the written acknowledgments on both sides that basically this may not come to fruition. You may not get your money back. So it's just like, you know, an investment in other things, right? You invest in the stock market and that business, that you know, that stock could be worthless at some point in time. You know, so you've entered into a situation where there may not be any guarantees of success, but that has to be laid out in your contract with whoever that party is. Otherwise, you're making assertions that, you know, they're going to get a return on that investment, and that may not happen. So it's not to say it can't be done, but you got to take very cautious and directed steps to be able to do that.
Okay.
Can I
say something too? I've done that before. I've gone to the big boys and asked them about this. You get a different perspective. First and foremost, the big boys have an entire department handling intellectual property. They are reticent to go and take your intellectual property for a couple of reasons. One, they don't know that they're already working on it in their department because they really have no clue what's going on over there, because it's like they're two different arms. They don't know what they're doing. The second one is if you haven't filed, if you haven't prepared a prototype, if you haven't demonstrated that the prototype is working to optimal operation, whatever you decide that might be, and it doesn't integrate well into their patent portfolio, you're at an extreme disadvantage all the way across the board. If you're coming to them saying, I got a great idea, give me money, how does that work? You're going to tell them what it is?
The whole point of this discussion is risk.
Yeah.
How much risk is the licensor willing to take? If all of it is an idea of it, it's a gigantic risk. If you've got a patent, it's a little less risk.
Right.
If you've got a working prototype, it's a little less risk. If you sold some of these things, it's a little less risk.
Right.
So if you were the licensor, would you be willing to take the risk? That's all you gotta look at.
And I've also gone to the other
That's
end.
how it works.
I had the prototype, I had the product, we produced it, it worked, we sold some of it. And the bottom line was, well, how much did you sell? I said, look, if I sold a lot of them, I wouldn't be talking to you. So, you know, what kind of question is that?
I run into that all the time.
It's terribly irritating, okay? Because if I was making $1 million, I wouldn't be asking you
wouldn't
for
be there.
anything because I'd be doing just fine.
It's just like Shark Tank.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, and Shark Tank is, again, if anybody wants to talk to me about Stephen Key's book, I'd be pleased to answer those questions right away, okay? Because that is somewhat confusing, okay? Stephen Key's book is not the end-all. That's number one. Shark Tank is not the end-all.
Oh, not by
There are enormous number of contracts that those guys enter into before they even get there
Yep.
to make sure that the guys who are sitting in the chairs deciding how much they're going to spend are going to get their money and the other guy promoting his product isn't, okay? So if you want me to tell you a little bit more about Shark Tank, I'd be glad to do that. I'd be willing to talk to you about Stephen Key's book as well. So any questions about that after this?
Okay, so thanks for those additional questions. So last month, we put a couple of slides together to let you know of some trade shows that we think may be of benefit to you. They run the gamut. These are the ones coming up pretty much through the end of this year. Licensing Expo, I talk about this one all the time. This is one I generally go to, but unfortunately this year I have a scheduling conflict and cannot go. But for those of you who are interested in licensing your product or are interested in learning about licensing, there are two tracks to this convention. One is you go walk the convention floor, you see exhibitors, you see what's out there in terms of licensing opportunities for your product and for inbound licensing. That's inbound and or outbound licensing. The second track is Licensing University. That is for those of you who are interested in learning more about what licensing is, what the opportunities are. There's a whole series of workshops and conferences that you can attend. So I would suggest you go to that conference if that is of interest to you. There's a cosmetology, beauty trade show also coming up in July, and then a series of other trade shows that are of relative importance. Jackie, there's one down here just for you. And Pack Expo. Pack Expo is another great opportunity if you plan to get into the packaging of a commercialized product. That's a convention that may be of interest to you as well.
Leslie, can I have a question?
Uh-huh.
I've been to licensing, excuse me, I've been to Licensing Expo a couple times, and maybe your experience was different, but I'm sorry. Speaking with people there, they only want to talk to people who have a product that's already out in the markets that they think has licensing potential. Did you have something, a character or something that had licensing potential? Because if you just go in there with a cool cartoon character or something, as much as they might like it, they say, well, have you sold that? You go, no. They go, we can't license it because we don't know who you are, or nobody knows you.
Yeah, it's a balance. Generally, so, and the trade show floor is divided up in various sections, right? You've got the licensing companies, agencies, consultants, so forth. You've got the various entertainment brands, and those run from, children's to TV to, movies, those types of things. You've got basically what's considered like the artist alley, artists and writers, people who have produced their own characters and are interested in doing further character development, such as you've created this, unique character and you want to look for opportunities to license it, whether that's as a children's book or consumable household products, or maybe as a game character or a movie. Those opportunities are there. Generally, if you go around and look at those floors, those folks have done a very good job of doing some level of character development to show that, hey, this could be interesting. There are the flukes that Angry Birds started out as a little video game and just blew up and is enormous worldwide. So there are those things there. But yeah, it is intended for basically those who are ready to go to market.
They've had some success already, someone already recognizes their character or has seen it somewhere, that's just.
Not necessarily, because there are a lot of booths there that are not well known. They are trying to become known.
$5,000, you can set one up right now for 10 by 10, but no one, they'll say, okay, we like your character, but who are you? I'm just making a comment in case anyone's going, just to be prepared.
Yeah, I'm not saying that any of you should go and well, it's too late now, but at any point to go and sign up for a booth. I mean, that's a huge advancement in your product development. But definitely going to learn about what the opportunities are for licensing. It's a learning engagement opportunity. Now, if you are ready for that advanced stage, it's probably too late at this point, but they do offer opportunities where you can go online and register and request one-on-one meetings with different exhibitors, different licensors, different houses to, get some feedback from them about your product. But I think it's a little too late at this point for that. But I wouldn't count it out completely.
Now, I have never been to License Expo, but I'm afraid if I go there, it's not for utility patent, but it would be more for like copyrights and characters and that. So is there?
No, there are household products there. There are well-known, established household consumer goods products there, like, Craftsman, for example. So those kinds of folks are there as well. Yeah. You'll just see more of some of the more broader, bigger entertainment areas, but in terms of consumer goods, baby wares, kids stuff, that's all there as well. They're just broken up in different sections. And you may find that some of those brands are represented by licensed agents rather than the brand itself. You may find that there as well. Okay? Just to go back to entity formation, I actually was on this website today because we, as a 501c3, have some of these same paperwork hurdles that we have to address. So I was on here fishing around today and filling some stuff out online and had to pay my $20 credit card processing fee for one of these. So I do recommend that you go on to the website. These are just a couple of the links, but there are a bunch of links on there relative to some of the business requirements that you face. The bottom one is a link on the same page, but it's a link to a business checklist. So it kind of just talks you through kind of like a little series of, step by step what to do when considering forming an entity. So again, I suggest you go to that website and take a quick peek when you're ready. I think most of you know who we all are. I think all the newbies are gone for the evening, but if you have any questions about our organization, how to get in touch with other people, other sponsors or service providers, you can reach out to any of us. I think except for Sydney, the rest of us are here tonight. And then, we've got some committee members who's here? Alex is here tonight. Ruth is out there. Grosnia, there you are, website. And Danny. So for our service providers and committee members, if you want to stand up and promote your service offering to the other folks in the room, go ahead and take this time. Go ahead.
I'll do that. Hey, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Grajina. I have a web design company called Underdog LLC, and even if you need the website, please contact me. My information is on San Diego Inventors Forum. You can find me easily.
Can you set up mail server?
Yes.
Yeah, let's say we have a domain name and we need, we don't want no more Gmail or Yahoo mail.
I can talk to you later.
Okay.
Yep, Chris?
My company worked for most of the big companies. I worked for Black & Decker, I worked for Crafts. Idea, it's the prototype you built in your garage, you've got a patent. I'm the guy that can take it into a professional product that you can market. Target design and manufacturing. I did 4 put products on each.
Great. Danny? promote A Squared?
Oh yeah, A Square Technologies is in San Marcos, California. We are an electronics manufacturing company, so if you got anything that you need assembled or built, come to us.
Great.
Flex circuits?
I'm sorry?
Flex circuits?
Flex circuits?
Yes.
No, not yet, but we can look into that.
You can do that.
Okay. We can put you in touch with someone that can help you with that. And then David, you want
Oh, next month?
to? No, yourself, and I'll
Oh,
touch
no,
on
I
it.
don't want to promote myself.
He's the IP guy.
I'm good.
He's got so much business, he's good. He's covered. Okay, so here's what's going to happen next month. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be here. You're going to miss me. But the show will go on. David is going to step up, and we're going to change the format just a little bit for next month. We're going to do a patent forum, an IP forum. So bring any and all of your questions about intellectual property, specifically patents, because that's his forte in the patent prosecution. And he will do his best to help address you with those particular issues. He's going to do more of a workshop process, and so kind of expect that.
What I'd like to do, if I could, is a lot of you would like to file provisional applications, but you don't want to pay me to do that. Okay, that's very expensive. All right, my minimum fee for 20 to 40 pages is $7,000. You go to a small private firm, that's $15,000. You go to Gordon & Reese, which is one of the companies I was with, your minimum's $25,000. So it's expensive. So I'm going to try and walk you through how to do a provisional on your own. Get all the parts right. Okay? So bring your ideas with you. Okay? I don't want you to disclose your technology to me. I'm going to bring a demo product with me. We're going to break it down. I'm going to show you how to draft a provisional application based on that product. And I know each one of yours is going to be a little bit different. So if you have specific questions about component parts or elements or specific things that you need to know that would relate specifically to your product without telling me what that is, I'll be able to answer it. And I think it'll be a really good session for you because you will actually learn how to prepare a document yourself that should be sufficient for the USPTO. Now, I will tell you right up front that I don't recommend that you file it right away. I recommend that you at least have somebody review it before you file it, just in case there may be errors in there, admissions or things like that, which you may not be aware of, but somebody who's experienced in the area would be able to tell you right away that those things need to be changed.
Well, I think that's pretty.
I hope that that will be helpful because nobody's actually done that. And I think that would be really helpful.
I got to give him something to do when I'm not here. So just keep in mind, this is a public forum. There is no duty of confidentiality in this room, and we are videoed. So this information is on the internet. So at that particular session, do not disclose anything that you feel is proprietary or that would bar you from actually obtaining a patent as you go through that process. So keep your questions at that particular time as generic as possible unless and until you make a personal appointment with him as a client. Okay? And I will make sure that information is repeated next month as well.
Absolutely.
So if there are no other questions,
I just have one question.
Oh.
So I've been working on different prototypes. I have many of them in my garage, but I just want to get some feedback. Is there a specific store where some of you go buy your plastic, your material to make those prototypes? Baker, I think you.
What's your question now?
Materials for prototypes.
For prototypes. Is there a specific store that some of you go to?
What kind of materials?
What do you build it?
you need.
There's a place called the Plastic and Metal Center in Laguna.
Ribbage is good. Industrial Metal Supply in Kearney Mesa is for all your metal.
And Ridout
You can go
is
to
in Kearney
Marshall's
Mesa?
Hardware to get a lot of little tweaky stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a plastic, what is it, the metal,
Where was the
sorry.
plastic one at?
The plastic one,
Ridout is in Kearney Villa, off Kearney Villa Road.
there's the other one off of Ruffin. There's
Oh, is
a,
that Ruffin? Maybe it's
Yeah,
Ruffin.
it's
It's red out.
They
Red out.
changed their name, they're not red out anymore.
yeah,
Oh,
I
it's
can't-
probably if you Google it.
yeah. There's a place you can get plastics, and I think it's off Ruffin
San
Road.
Diego Plastics is in Chula Vista.
It's kind of near Ruffin and Claremont
Yeah, that's the
intersection. I can't think of the name off the top of my head.
I thought it was red out, but
No,
I
they
guess it's
changed
not
their
that
name,
anymore.
it's E something now.
Oh, really? Yeah. If Chris says it's changed its
Yeah.
name, but it used to be rid out, R-I-D-O-U-T.
And there's San Diego Plastics is in National Center.
They have a scrap bin you can go through.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, they
Yeah.
just give it to you.
Yeah, and industrial metal supply, I like going and playing over there and getting stuff too, so I was just there 2 weeks ago.
And also Handy Metal Mart in National City.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you all very much. We went over a little bit on time tonight. I'm gonna give you a few minutes for last minute networking, and then you'll be out the door with the rest of us.
Take care.
Thank you.
It's just south of San Diego. It's in between San Diego and It was
That's not a What's up, buddy? Let's get start turning.
What's up, boo?
Let's do good one.
Do what you gotta do.
I suppose you can turn metal 30%. It could be the same tool.
Let's do